You're listening to the Full Court Press with your host, Drew Duncan. Don't you dare touch that dial.
This guy, he needs an ass whooping, man, in my hands. And there's nobody else in line, man, besides the guy. You need to unify the belts. You can't run away. If you want a money fight versus Nate, just set it down, walk away. But I guarantee you, he's an athlete. He's going to take it right to the heart because he doesn't like being called a paper champ. And that paper champ is all paper, man. He talked his way to the title. He's talked his way into a whole lot. I'm a mental warfare kind of guy. He's good at this. So when you put those kind of things in together, my high IQ and my fight IQ is way too much for this guy. I'm way too much for him. And I saved a lot of my A+ material for that bastard. He's yellow. I mean, honestly, he has no backbone. He has no spine. He's never mentioned my name ever. He said he was going to watch this fight. Not only did he watch the fight, he's sitting there on his yacht drinking a beer saying, holy, I got the boogeyman on my tail. The Grim Reaper's coming from my ass. That's what he's saying, dude. I have his number. I put the numbers down. I got my belt. I'm looking at it right now. It's actually pretty dope. It's nice and shiny.
You just heard it right there. Tony El Kakoy Ferguson, a guy that we brought up not too long ago, before and after his interim title fight. Shots directly fired at Conor McGregor. He's going in. Man, Tony is a lunatic. Tony and Conor are the lunatics in the UFC. I mean, you want to talk about assailants running an asylum? Dude, I don't think there needs to be a third and final trilogy fight right now with Nate Diaz. There doesn't need to be that. There needs to be Conor McGregor and Tony Ferguson getting after it. Look, Conor just got a big payday with his fight against Floyd Mayweather. A fight that, to be honest with you, was a big letdown. There were a couple of times where Conor had opportunities in that fight, didn't take them. He had Mayweather open. You could tell he was scared to throw sometimes out of fear that Mayweather would duck him and then come back with some counters. Mayweather said that his punching power and boxing was not everything that everybody made it out to be in the UFC. It's all there is to it. Now, everybody's talking about Paul Malignini and all these other fights that could happen. Look, all other boxing fights for Conor McGregor are going to be a massive train wreck. There's no reason for him to go back to boxing. He's an MMA guy. That's all there is to it. And by the way, Conor did respond. He had a GTA-style, Grand Theft Auto video game style of picture on his Twitter, and it simply said, Tony. Doesn't get any more blatant than that. I think Conor's just saying, look, dude, I'm holding all the marbles. I've got everything here. If you want me, you're going to have to come and fight me for it. You're going to have to get me. That's all there is to it. Basically, the idea that I get is, look, I'm sitting on top of the mountain, and there's absolutely no reason for me to come down to your level right now. But Tony's right, though. I can't remember the last time I heard Conor McGregor go, well, Tony Ferguson, calling out everybody else. And I'm to tell you what, when Tony Ferguson was on this program right here, when I interviewed him, he blatantly told me, because at the time he was 21-0, and he flat out told me, was like, dude, I'm sick and tired of everybody calling out everybody else, but nobody wants a piece of me. They're all scared. And if you may recall, the last time we talked about Tony Ferguson, that's because he was taking shots at his next opponent, Kevin Lee. And this is the quote that I use. You want to talk about a man's man quote. Here it is right here. Quote, you are better off stripping your clothes off, pouring gasoline on your body, and running through hell than trying to F with a guy like me. End quote. Bruh. Do you honestly think that Conor McGregor and Tony Ferguson would not only make a great fight, but don't you honestly think it would make great warfare as well? Better than what we saw with Mayweather and McGregor. The only time that whole little tour that they did to promote that fight was any good, the only thing that we got that was anything at all was in Canada. That was it. We're not going to get anything else. We weren't going to get anything else. Everything else was repetitive. It felt odd. It was weird. It was forced. It was the same thing over and over again. I mean, it was seriously like watching WWF back in the day. I know, it's called WWE now. I don't care. In my day, it was WWF. It's what it is. It was like watching the World Wrestling Federation. You knew that The Rock was going to come on. If you smell what The Rock is cooking, you knew Stone Cold was going to come on. And that's the bottom line, because Stone Cold said so. You knew that somebody was going to have to rest in peace. You knew DX was going to come on. We got 2 words for you. But it was so entertaining that we couldn't get enough of it. But the thing was, though, is when you were watching that versus what you saw with Mayweather, McGregor, it just felt so natural. It just looked right. McGregor-Mayweather thing doesn't look right. When you hear Tony, it don't sound like a lump of nonsense coming out his mouth, dude. I just, when I listen to Tony, when I watch him, it just doesn't seem like this guy's talking sideways out of his neck. I feel like he's being who he really is. And I feel like he knows how to get under somebody's skin. If there's a guy out there right now that knows how to do it, it's Tony Ferguson. Because Nate Diaz has been trying to do it forever. Ever since that last fight, Nate Diaz has constantly made posts about McGregor. How he's not this, how he's not that, how he really didn't win that last. I mean, honestly, it's really kind of to the point where Nate Diaz is starting to look like a fanboy more than he is somebody who wants a fight. I mean, honestly, somebody who's just jealous, somebody who's just being petty. I mean, that's what Nate Diaz looks like. Tony Ferguson looks like a man on a mission. That's what he looks like. Normally, I would stay away from TMZ. Normally, I would. They put out a bunch of nonsense. I wish they'd stay away from sports. But I'm glad they got this. And I'm glad that he went right after Conor McGregor. Because to me, this is the fight that I want to see. Yeah, Tony Ferguson's a guy with a lot of range and reach, the same way that Diaz is. Tony Ferguson, I think, is a little bit more balanced, though. Fighting with something to prove, though, the same way that Diaz was. You know, this whole thing with Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor started with Nate Diaz saying, "You're taking everything I worked for, you MFer. I'm sick of this." I'm telling you, man, that Tony Ferguson is the fight right now. I don't want to see McGregor back in a boxing ring in another awkward fight. I don't want to see him fight Nate Diaz again. We've already had it. You know, let's end a career on that or something. This is something that he's got to do. Tony's not going to walk around being called paper champion by anybody. He's just not going to tolerate it. And I can't blame him. I mean, seriously, put yourself in his position. You've done everything that you need to do to get to this point in your life. You know, Kevin Lee, you haven't fought in a year. You haven't fought in a year. Well, that's because I ran through everybody. Remember, that's what Tony said. I've already ran through everybody. That's why I haven't fought. There's nobody left for me to fight. This is the thing that I love about the UFC. This is the one aspect of it that could be keeping it together, is the constant trash talk that a lot of these guys do back and forth. And you could tell when Tony was running his mouth, Kevin Lee was just, I mean, the look in his eyes, it was fear. Especially when he laid that gasoline line on him. Good night. I mean, this is more entertaining than watching Mr. T and Sly Stallone and Rocky III. This is more entertaining than Rocky III, period. Remember, Hogan was in Rocky III, the Hulkster. But he wasn't in there as Hulk Hogan. He was in there as Thunderlips, the Ultimate Male. Remember that? Last stop, meatball. Last stop. This is better than that. So much better than last stop, meatball. Although I love that line. I'm going to break him in half like this. This is great. But here again, though, this is where we see the problem with the UFC. Dana White is trying to pick his next move with McGregor, And he's trying to get this big money fight, this huge pay-per-view that's going to have this ginormous ending. That's what he's looking for. I remember one night when me and my best friend, we got the Conor McGregor fight, 13 seconds. Waited till midnight for a 13-second fight. As entertaining as that is, when you're waiting for other boring fights to end. And look, and I get it. As a fight promoter, you try to put these cards together that are amazing. And everybody's fighting at different times and all this stuff. But I'm telling you right now, the one thing that Lorenz Larkin, who's a Bellator fighter, got on this program and said the difference between the UFC and Bellator is Bellator is concerned with putting on an entire show that hopefully ends in a really great main event. Whereas the UFC is kind of like boxing, and they're just looking for that big money fight, and you've got a bunch of undercard guys that nobody knows about, that nobody cares about, because they're not frequent enough. And part of that, I think, was the UFC's fault, because they had gone to pay-per-views for so long. They got off of Spike TV, where Bellator is now taken over. Now, they started doing the UFC on Fox, and they were doing that nearly every single Saturday. But even then, that's kind of gotten a little flaky in here and there. Sometimes they just replay pay-per-view fights. So there's a lot of people that even though you may know the result, you might watch it a couple weeks later and go, well, I got to see the fight anyways for free. The point that I'm making is this. Number one, you've got to get back to a consistent basis. And it's really hard right now because football is taking a big part of what Fox is doing. Whether it's on your local Fox, whether it's on Fox Sports, whatever the case may be, it's taking a huge chunk. And how can you blame them? College football on Saturdays is a big deal. And I've talked about this 101 times. Everybody's trying to dip their hand in that pot, reaching in for a coin. For instance, this Saturday, if I remember correctly, Oklahoma State is playing on Fox. Matter of fact, I think Fox on local TV has a doubleheader of football games this Saturday. Put that in perspective really quick. What would you rather do? Would you rather watch those fights and a lot of people that you don't know about? Because the idea of anything is getting to know your athletes, your players, whatever the sport may be. That's part of it. But do people want to put in the time with mixed martial arts? Because the very real reality of it is there's a lot of guys out there fighting. I guarantee you there's not a state that doesn't have local fighters out the wazoo. I mean, I can think of, I don't know how many that I've interviewed right here in the state of Kansas. I'm Wichita alone. Everybody seems to be trying to jump into this. The problem with MMA is it's becoming more of a fad than a lifestyle. The people who succeed, it is a lifestyle to them. To guys like Diaz, McGregor, guys before him like Don Fry, Hoist Gracie, matter of fact, the entire Gracie stable, it was a lifestyle. And it was about proving that their style of fighting was the best. That's exactly what Hoist Gracie told me when I interviewed him. He said, yeah, we fight, but we don't fight for money or anything else. We fight to prove that our style is the best. It's about pride. And the men who understand that and the women who understand that are in this sport are the ones who make it out. They get it. You could say whatever you want to about Ronda Rousey, but she understood it. I could say whatever I want to about Amanda Nunes, but she understands it. And I've had lady fighters on here before, not just from Wichita, but Felice Herrick from the UFC. Just had Anna Hulaton yesterday on this program. Those women are women who get it. I've had Ferguson. I've had Matt Brown. I've had Amanda Nunes. I've had a plethora of fighters on here. David Rickles from right here in Wichita. Talked to that guy I don't know how many times in interviews. Chris Harris right here in Wichita. Those are people that get it. It's a day in and day out job, and it puts a lot of wear and tear on your body. There's no off season like in the NFL. People finally just take a break and go, dude, I can't anymore. I am tired of getting kicked in the face. Sometimes you can't get a fight like Tony or Anna. Bottom line is this. UFC is going to make this work. If they're able to get this fight, which I think would be the premier fight right now in the UFC between Tony Ferguson and Conor McGregor, then they're going to have to put together a great card. You have to talk to your guys and say, look, are you willing to take a little bit of time off so that way we can put together a great card? And if they're smart, they'll want to be on the McGregor card because it's going to get them some visibility. This is the Full Court Press. We'll be back right after this. Don't you dare touch that dial.